Colston Loveland was not featured in the Bears' new look offense. What does that mean for his dynasty value? We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Michael Fabiano. And on today's show, we're talking about some of the biggest losers and winners coming out of Monday Night Football. We're going to start with some losers. But also, we're going to tell you the guys that you want to pick up on your waiver wires going into week 2. Fabs, I want to start with the Bears in this game. The first drive of this game looked absolutely awesome. They were moving the ball up and down the field. And then it kind of stalled a little bit. We didn't see much of this offense in the second half. And more concerning, Colston Loveland, 2 catches for 12 yards on 2 targets. Cole Kmet actually got more work. How concerned are you about Colston Loveland this year and from a dynasty perspective?
I'm not concerned long-term, but you can't play him right now. Cole Kmet had 60 snaps, as you mentioned. Loveland only played in 2 tight end sets. Was targeted a couple of times. Kmet made that bananas catch. It was the only catch that he made in the game. But Loveland, at least based on what we saw last night, is simply not going to get enough playing time and enough targets to warrant being a fantasy starter right now. Long-term, obviously, listen, the Bears like him. They drafted him 10th overall, but this may be a bit of a slow burn. And Cole Kmet's a good player. That was the one concern I had when the Bears drafted Loveland from a immediate gratification standpoint. I didn't think there would be much because Kmet's still in the mix. And based on what we saw last night, he's still the starter. He's still the number 1 tight end in Chicago. And he is in the way of Colston Loveland making an immediate fantasy impact.
So this one's really tricky for me because I loved Colston Loveland as a prospect. I actually thought he was a better prospect than Tyler Warren. And obviously the Bears agreed. They drafted him ahead of Warren. But what we've been saying all offseason is we thought Tyler Warren had a better path to fantasy success right away. And we saw that. Like Tyler Warren got a lot of work in this Indianapolis offense where you have someone like Loveland who's buried behind Cole Kmet. There's a lot of other weapons in this offense. So it feels very much like you're just going to have to wait here. And the ADPs have been close. Tyler Warren, tight end 4, Colston Loveland, tight end 6. I wouldn't change that at all, but you're going to have to go out. If you have Colston Loveland as your starting tight end in the Dynasty League right now, you're going to have to go out and get a Jake Ferguson or a Dallas Goedert or somebody just to get you through.
I always liked Warren more than Loveland from a fantasy perspective. I thought it was close, but I thought that you would get that immediate gratification from Warren based on the opportunities that he was going to have in Indianapolis, which were clear cut compared to Chicago, where, I mean, listen, they don't have, these high-end elite type of players, although Rome Odunze looked really good last night. Yeah. But they have a lot of good players. And so there's more mouths to feed in Chicago's passing game. Yeah,
we'll see. Maybe as the season goes along, we'll start to see that split flip, and we'll see Loveland as the feature tight end. Because again, you spend the 10th overall pick on a tight end, you're going to get him involved. So I don't think this is going to be an all-season thing where he's 2 catches for 12 yards, 3 catches for 15. Like, he's going to get more involved. It's just going to be a slow burn, as you mentioned, compared to Tyler Warren. Let's continue to look at this Bears offense. We were a little bit worried about this backfield coming into the season. We were worried about the split. Who's going to be that second running back? Is Roschon Johnson, who's banged up right now, is he going to eat into the workload? Not the case at all. DeAndre Swift, 17 carries in this game. The only running back on the team to get a touch. He also had 5 targets in the passing game. If you traded for DeAndre Swift this offseason, if you drafted him in a startup, you got to be pretty happy with this usage.
Happy with the volume, not so happy with the production. He did nothing.
He looked good though. That's the thing. He ran hard.
But the problem is at the end of the day, the bottom line for fantasy managers is production. And so the volume was there, was good. It kind of reminded me of like Tony Pollard. The volume was there, the points weren't. And that was the same thing with Swift. Next week, he's got Detroit in a revenge game, and he hadn't done really well against Detroit in his career, only a couple of games. But Swift has always been that guy that you see potential for being maybe a mid to high RB2. He's twitchy, he's fast. It rarely comes to fruition. And that's the issue with DeAndre Swift. I love the volume. It's hard not to. I mean, played 54 snaps. I mean, Kyle Monin guy, again, as you mentioned, not in the offense, not involved at all. So you like that. But again, it's that lack of production based on the volume that he's seeing that's a problem.
I think I am buying DeAndre Swift because he actually had a couple of really nice carries that were taken back by penalties. Chicago was just incredibly sloppy this entire game. Like, it was just a rough outing. But I mean, you're getting 20 plus touches a week. And actually, the main thing is I thought he looked good. Like, he was running powerful. There was one run that he had on the left side of the field where he just ran over a Vikings defender. He looked quick. He looked athletic. Bigger days are coming. And if you can tell me that he's going to be getting 75, 80% of the workload in the Bears offense, which we still think is going to be pretty good, sign me up. I think DeAndre Swift is one of the biggest winners from week one, even without the fantasy production being elite.
Yeah, sometimes you got to look at the volume. Again, it's the same sort of situation like Omarion Hampton. The volume was there, the points weren't. So you got a little good news, a lot of bad news. But if that's going to be the game plan and the blueprint for the Bears offense moving forward, then of course the volume will eventually turn into production. I just wonder if it's going to be consistent production.
Yeah. Let's talk about Caleb Williams real quick before we move on. 21 to 35, 210 yards, threw a touchdown, also ran for 58 yards and a touchdown. I thought he looked really good as a runner. The accuracy stuff is still all over the place. He's sailing balls that he shouldn't be sailing. He's missing some open guys. But if he's going to give you 40 yards on the ground every week, 35 yards on the ground, he's going to be a QB1.
I had 24 points last night. That's a hell of a game. You will take that all day long. And he almost had his second rushing touchdown. If you remember, he stepped out of bounds there with the half yard line.
Yep.
So from a passing perspective, but this is Caleb. There were points where I was like, wow, like that pass that he made while he was running towards the sidelines to Rome Odunze, that was freaking amazing. Like, not too many quarterbacks can make those plays. But then when they're, trying to score late in the game, as you mentioned, he was floating balls. So you got a little bit of good Caleb, you got a little bit of bad Caleb. I remember tweeting last night early in the game, "Ooh, Caleb looked good on that first drive." And then I'm like, where'd that guy go? Listen, man, he has QB1 potential in fantasy. We all know that. He showed it last night, even though the performance was peaks and valleys. But as you mentioned, if he's going to run, and he looked quick too, man. People forget when he was at USC, he was the guy who could run with the ball. I mean, they're not designing runs for him like Jaden Daniels or Lamar. But I mean, when he needs to run, he can run. And he's not afraid to go in there. And, he had that one rushing touchdown where the defenders were closing in on him and, potentially take a hit. So from a fantasy standpoint, I feel pretty good about last night. From a real football standpoint, if I'm a Bears fan, I'm like, damn, same old.
Here's the thing I would say. Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, is a mess. Like some of the stuff that he was doing in the second half was just absurd. Like, they're not going to play Brian Flores every single week. They're going to go up against much more vanilla defenses. And Caleb's going to be fine. Now, he's got to improve the accuracy. He's got to improve the touch. But I came away from that game thinking he survived against Brian Flores. There's a lot of quarterbacks that don't. I think he's going to be okay for the rest of the season.
Yep. I'm not concerned about I'm concerned about the consistency. Yes. I think at the end of the day, though, he was one of my breakout quarterbacks for this season. And remember, even though he was really unreliable last year, he still finished as the QB 15. So you're not telling me that he can't improve to the point where he moves up 3 or 4 spots at the quarterback position this season? I think he can easily do that.
All right, let's flip over to the Minnesota side of things because I thought,
oh my God, Marcus, this one here.
I mean, a tale of 2 halves, really, right?
A tale of 3 quarters compared to 1.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Vikings backfield next. This episode is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. And if you need parts for a project fast, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. I know for me, there's a lot of times I'm working on something. I don't want to wait a week, 2 weeks for the part to come in. That is where Supply House has all of the competition beat. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first offer. That is supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. It's not fun at all to do it between login screens, prices jumping at the checkout. It's all frustrating. But that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price that you see is the price that you pay. I was looking at some tickets to go to some Bills games here in the next couple of weeks, and some of the deals I've seen are absolutely amazing. You can get into some of your favorite games for under $100. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Phelps, let's go to the Vikings side of things. And before we get to J.J. McCarthy, because we'll get to him in a second, let's talk about the running backs. Jordan Mason had 15 carries in this game for 68 yards, while Aaron Jones only 8 carries for 23 yards. Now, he did get more work in the passing game, 3 catches for 44 yards, scored a touchdown. But I thought it was notable that Mason is pretty clearly their top runner in this offense.
He looked better than Aaron Jones as a runner. I mean, which is not surprising. Mason's 26, Aaron Jones is 30. And Mason showed some flashes last year in San Francisco before he got hurt. Really impressive. Yards per carry was very impressive. And I wouldn't be surprised if his workload only increases. You know, he's not going to be a guy who's going to catch a ton of balls out of the backfield, but the Vikings look like they have an established situation in that backfield, right? Mason's going to run the football. He'll get the goal line work, I think, and more often than not. Jones is going to be mixed into the early down work as well, but he's also going to be used as a pass catcher. That's where he scored his touchdown, as you mentioned. Jones had a better fantasy day. He had 15.7 points, but it was because of that touchdown. Mm-hmm. But moving forward, I think it's going to be hard to really decipher which back is going to be the better back to start on a week-to-week basis. It's really going to come down to matchup and projected game script, to be honest with you. But this is a situation here where you drafted Jordan Mason thinking that he could take over that lead role in that backfield. And while I don't think that's going to happen this season unless Jones gets hurt, you could clearly see that the Vikings have a plan for him to be their runner, to be the guy that, you know, that gets the football when they need those tough yards on the ground. And Aaron Jones will be mixed in a little bit too. This is the definition of a backfield committee, but Mason has more upside here from a dynasty perspective, and that's clear.
I just thought Mason looked really good. And again,
really good.
I think the fantasy production will come. They were also without the Vikings, without Christian Darrisaw, their Pro Bowl left tackle. He does make a big difference in the run game. And this Bears defense is pretty good, especially up front. So I think some better days are coming for Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. But yeah, Mason, I think I was surprised to see the running back split, like the actual carries go so heavily to Mason. And maybe that's not the case every single week, but man, if I'm Kevin O'Connell, like, I don't know how I take Jordan Mason off the field as a runner. He's just superior right now.
Yeah, a very good player. Again, we saw flashes of that when McCaffrey went down last year in San Francisco, and then Mason unfortunately got hurt with the shoulder. But he's fresh, he's healthy. He does not have a lot of work career-wise, so he is. He is. I would be surprised if he didn't lead this backfield in carries throughout the course of the season. And I had talked about this, during the preseason too. Aaron Jones is the bigger name. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Mason were the better fantasy back this season. And then moving forward, if you're looking at it from a dynasty perspective, maybe the Vikings are hoping Mason takes over and is their top back for the next few years.
Jordan Mason, RB35 in the latest batch of ADP that we have from Dynasty League Football. Got a feeling that's going to change by the time we get to October, but a massive value in an offense that we think is going to get better as the year goes on. Let's talk about JJ McCarthy's first NFL start. Up and down would be kind, right? 13 of 20,
It's driving me nuts, bro. I was like, bring in Carson Wentz, my Justin Jefferson shares. I'm watching them go to hell, in a handbasket. I was freaking out, dude.
So here's the thing: if you have JJ McCarthy in your dynasty leagues, you wake up this morning and if you didn't watch the game, you feel pretty good about what he gave you from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah.
But if you watch the first 3 quarters, it looked really rough. And then things flipped and you could see the confidence growing to the point, honestly, Fabs, like I was telling you pre-show, like I don't worry about the Vikings quarterbacks because Kevin O'Connell is so stinking good.
And I kept thinking about that while I was tweeting and freaking out about Justin Jefferson's lack of production in the game. And not for nothing, he still didn't have a great Justin Jefferson type of game, but we'll get into that. But McCarthy just looked like a guy making his first NFL start, and I didn't want to overreact, but I'm like, oh, can they get Kirk Cousins back? I'm so it's not about McCarthy, it's about Jefferson because I have shares of him, and it just concerned me so much that the targets weren't getting there. I mean, he only had 4 catches in the game, but then in that fourth quarter, it's like a light switch went on, and all of a sudden McCarthy looked great, right? He had a couple touchdown passes. He rushed for a touchdown. He scored over 22 fantasy points. And you're like, whoa, okay, well, better late than never, I guess, from a fantasy perspective. Now you got Atlanta next week. All of a sudden, JJ McCarthy is in that starting conversation, certainly in Superflex leagues. If you're going to get that kind of production, and I don't know that you will every single week, but if that's McCarthy's ceiling, 22, 24 points, I feel pretty good about him this season. And as you mentioned, and maybe I'm just a negative Nancy, a worry wart, whatever, you can call me what you want. I should know to have confidence in Kevin O'Connell's offense because dudes like Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs have had success short term, but have had success in this offense. And McCarthy obviously has a far greater resume and a far greater pedigree being a 10th overall pick in the draft last year than those guys do. So let's hope that this is a springboard for McCarthy to put up really good numbers and at least be more consistent and have more good weeks than bad weeks.
Do you know what the play was for me that kind of sold me? It was the 2-point conversion that he threw to Adam Thielen. It was in that, the top corner, the right side of your screen.
Yep.
He just threw a frozen rope to Thielen, like right at the pylon. And there's a lot of quarterbacks that can't make that throw. And he threw it with timing, anticipation, and there was a lot of juice on that ball. Like I think he's going to be fine. This was a road game against his childhood team growing up. I think he was amped up. And I also think because of the Darrisaw injury, they were trying to protect him a little bit too much in the first half. And once that pick 6 happened, I think then they really pulled back. And then, later in this game, Kevin O'Connell had no choice but to open it up. And that's where you saw him get more comfortable. There's going to be weeks where it's shaky. They've got some tough games coming up against some good defenses. I don't think he's a every week start in your dynasty leagues, but I feel pretty good about McCarthy being a good asset for us moving forward.
Yeah, the matchup upcoming against Atlanta is a positive one for McCarthy, and also I believe that's the Sunday night game, so it's another game where he's going to be playing in front of a nationally televised audience. So the NFL's putting his feet to the fire, and for 3 quarters he failed miserably, and in that fourth quarter, all of a sudden we got something here.
All right, let's talk about some waiver wire additions coming out of week 1. Who are the players that you need to pick up to dominate your dynasty leagues? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Like for me, I love the futures market. Like I love on a Tuesday morning after all the games are over to go see, okay, hey, who's the favorite to win the Super Bowl? Who's going to win the division that my team plays in? Who's going to make the playoffs? It's all available on FanDuel. It's the absolute best way to play. It's quick, it's easy, and it adds just a little bit more energy and juice to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. The NFL season is finally here. So for your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL Podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of NFL espresso to start your football day. And then Tony Wiggins will take you home to the barbershop with the smoothest breakdowns. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Fabs, let's talk about some waiver wire additions. Who is the number one guy that you are trying to pick up in your dynasty leagues?
From a dynasty perspective, you always know that it always depends on your own personal need. Calvin Austin is a guy that I know you liked last week. I had him in my waiver wire column last week over at Sports Illustrated, and he popped. 6 targets, 4 catches, 70 yards, scored a touchdown, 17 fantasy points. The Steelers don't have that wide receiver 2 going into the season behind DK Metcalf. We didn't know who it was going to be. I think maybe now we know who it's going to be. And Calvin Austin, and obviously Dynasty is much different from a waiver wire perspective than redrafts because all these guys are going to be available. But in Dynasty, it's much different. So if you're looking for wide receiver help, and I have another wide receiver to give you as well, Calvin Austin's probably going to be a guy who's near the top of the list. And for no other reason listen, I know Aaron Rodgers is old. I didn't doubt that Aaron Rodgers could still be a very good quarterback in the NFL, and he had 4 touchdown passes. And what Aaron Rodgers does, and he's done historically, listen, he makes wide receivers better. He does, okay? He's done it throughout his entire career. And even at 41 years old, like last year, he had 2 very good wide receivers from a fantasy perspective. Now, I'm not saying Calvin Austin's going to be Devontae Adams, folks, but the ceiling just got bigger. The ceiling just got better for Calvin Austin. So he's a guy that I would certainly be going after.
Yeah, and I think he's just a perfect guy to pick up if you lost like Xavier Worthy to the shoulder injury, or Drake London, who's dealing with a shoulder injury. Calvin Austin is a really strong fit with Aaron Rodgers, who had the fastest average time to throw on Sunday. He also had the lowest average depth of target. And Calvin Austin, what he does best is catch short passes, make plays after the catch.
Yep.
I think there's going to be some games coming up where he has 7 or 8 catches just because the pass rush is getting there and Rodgers wants to get the ball out of his hands. I don't know you're going to get these 4 for 70 and a touchdown weeks every game, but he's the clear-cut wide receiver 2 on an offense that we think is going to throw the ball a lot. I mean, Aaron Rodgers threw the ball 30 times, and traditionally with Mike Tomlin, that's not been the way that they want to win. But when you have Aaron Rodgers, I think he's going to want to throw the ball. So I do think Calvin Austin is somebody that's a really nice stash that you can play as a flex guy every single week.
He is going to be near the top of the list of the players that you want to go out. And so is Kayshon Boutte. I always wonder if it's Boutte or Boutte.
Boutte. It's Boutte.
I'm not sure. I like saying Boutte. Okay. Yeah. And so, they bring in Stephon Diggs. Everyone's talking Kyle Williams. Oh my God. He's so bad. Boutte leads the Patriots wide receivers in snaps, in targets, in receiving yards, and in fantasy points. And he tied Diggs for the team lead with 6 catches. He averaged 17.2 yards per catch. And he had 2 big plays, which are plays of 20 plus yards against Las Vegas. And if you remember last year, there were a couple of games where, okay, maybe we got a little something here in Boutte. I like to say that. So he is a player who's available in a lot of dynasty leagues because everyone was thinking, they got Diggs and Kyle Williams, and here we go. And they got Demario Douglas. There is a world where this kid ends up being the lead wide receiver in New England, at least for part of the year. Diggs is a veteran guy. He's 31 coming off a knee. So go get him. He could end up being Drake May's one of his favorite targets in the passing game, and clearly he's got a rapport with him because we saw it on Sunday.
Yeah, Butte after the game was talking about how, hey, remember I was considered a first round talent who dropped in the draft for some not so great reasons. Yeah, I'm with you. The other thing is I don't think Stephon Diggs looked all that great. And again, he's coming off a torn ACL. We should give him a little bit of grace. But I thought Butte just looked better. And honestly, I can see a world where it's just Butte and Kyle Williams and Pop Douglas at some point in the season. They either cut Diggs, they trade him, or maybe it's not until 2026. But Butte is somebody that I think should be on your dynasty rosters.
Yeah, there's no quite a question about that. It was funny because in one of my dynasty leagues, I had Butte, and I had to make a choice between him and Parker Washington to cut somebody once my rookies joined the roster, and I'm like, yeah, I'm cutting Washington, so I'm very happy that I kept Butte. And then one other player, Marcus, that people can go out and grab is Daniel Jones.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few quarterbacks in dynasty leagues who are available. Very few. Daniel Jones is kind of out there. He's not out there in a ton of leagues, but he's out there. And I mean, he completed 75% of his passes. He led the Colts to a score on every possession. Now he's got Denver this week. Okay.
Not
so
playing.
I don't know if
Denver.
I want anything to do with Daniel Jones against the Broncos. Maybe in Superflex. Okay. But as Marcus and I have talked about, especially Marcus liked him in week 1, there's going to be weeks where Daniel Jones is going to be a viable fantasy starter, especially when you get into the bye weeks. And last week, he was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football. All right. We're not getting anything twisted here. Okay. This guy is not going to end up turning into Peyton Manning. We know that. But based on what we saw last week and the numbers that some of his receivers put up, Michael Pittman had a very good game. Obviously, Tyler Warren, my guy, had a very good game.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about him being good for the Colts offense in their passing game. And so while, again, you could go out and grab him, you don't have to play him, and I wouldn't against Denver, he is still potentially going to be a useful asset. As long as he's playing at a modest level, I don't think he's got to play at an elite level every single week. He is not going to be a danger of losing that job to Anthony Richardson.
No. And we've seen Gardner Minshew put up some decent fantasy numbers in this same offense, right? And I think Daniel Jones is a much better athlete. You're going to have a higher floor because of the rushing potential. And I just think the weapons are better now than they were a couple of years ago when Gardner Minshew was a quarterback. So I think you're going to have to pick and choose a little bit the weeks to play him. But I don't think he's an awful fantasy option. In fact, I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that are being drafted in that same range or that are being valued in that same range that I would just prefer Daniel Jones over. The big thing, and we said this on Monday's show, Daniel Jones gives the rest of the playmakers on offense a floor that they just didn't have with Anthony Richardson because he was so inaccurate that they would have these games where you're completing like 8 passes, and that's just no way that you can have a viable offense. I think Daniel Jones helps Tyler Warren. He helps Michael Pittman. I think he actually helps Jonathan Taylor quite a bit as well. And I think that's what gets me the most excited about this Colts offense moving forward.
Yeah, it was a very good week 1. The Dolphins defense stinks. I want to see him do it against some good defenses, but it was certainly a positive week.
Yeah. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the show on YouTube as well. You can follow Fabs on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.